This week on Vaticano, exactly 100 years ago, on October the 13th, 1917, the Virgin Mary appeared for the last time to the three shepherds of Fatima. Stay with us to recall the events that predicted the course of 20th century history. Walk with us through the city of the saintly shepherd children and relive the canonization of Jacinta and Francisco. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. Portugal, Fatima. This shrine of the Holy Rosary is one of the largest and perhaps most famous Marian sanctuaries in the world. Every year, millions of people visit this site. Pilgrims come from all corners of the world, some of them with joy and others with sorrow, but all with a great devotion to the Virgin Mary. Tradition here has pilgrims walk on their knees across the square as far as the Basilica of Our Lady of the Rosary. A lot of them do it regardless of their age or social status. A prayerful atmosphere reigns all day here, and when evening comes, the air is infused with the sounds of hymns and the voices of prayer of the Rosary. There's a smell of incense and burning wax. There are hundreds of candles sacrificing themselves before God's grandeur, and every candle carries the prayer of the pilgrim who lit it. Those who have visited this place share wonderful impressions of quiet joy and peace. But what exactly makes this shrine so special, and why does it attract so many pilgrims? "100 years ago, the Virgin Mary appeared right here to three small children and entrusted three secrets to them. This is the exact location of the apparitions. It's marked by a marble pillar, which holds a statue of the Virgin Mary. These three children were Lucia Santos on the left, and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto. The Bishop of Fatima, Antonio Augusto dos Santos Marto, explains the nature of the Fatima messages.
Il messaggio di Fatima.
The message of Fatima refers to the greatest, most tragic events of the 20th century, the two world wars. These were something unheard of. It was the first time they happened, with their genocides, millions of innocent victims. Then also a message for the Church that was persecuted under atheist and totalitarian regimes, threatened to be destroyed and divided. So it was a message of grace, to say that God is with us, He doesn't leave us alone. The mercy of God has a higher limit than the power of evil, and also of peace. These three words are the gift Our Lady brings: grace, mercy, and peace.
Al potere devastante del male e di pace.
In a private apparition, these three children received important messages that referred to the whole world.
E la Madonna viene a cercare collaboratori.
The Madonna came to look for collaborators in the merciful design of God before the power of evil. So this is also relevant for the world today. Today there aren't so many persecutions of atheist regimes, but there's the danger of something, in my view, that's worse: religious indifference. To live as if God didn't exist, to live with your back to God. The sense of God is lost, and when one loses the sense of God, they also lose the sense of humanity. Because of this, the message is always relevant.
The message of Fatima is still relevant in our days, and the divine grace of this place is not exhausted. The millions of pilgrims who visit the place testify to this. And so do the many people who have received graces by appealing to Our Lady of Fatima. And you too, if you visit the shrine or consecrate yourself to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. We're in the small village of Aljustrel, about 100 miles from Lisbon, the capital city of Portugal. Today, Aljustrel is known all over the world and attracts thousands of pilgrims because of the story of 3 children who saw the Virgin Mary. It happened right here. Father Francisco Pereira, chaplain of the Shrine of Fatima, explains that before understanding the nature of the apparitions, it's important to go back to the Aljustrel of the early 20th century.
Aljustrel, it was 100 years ago, is a small hamlet in the parish of Fatima. And these 10-20 houses that have some families who live from the agriculture, from the sheep. And so these children went from profoundly Christian families, Catholic families, who prayed every day, who taught them to pray every day, taught them to be honest, not lie, to tell always the truth, to live the love to God and for the others.
At the beginning of the 20th century, Antonio dos Santos and Maria Rosa Ferreira, peasants of this hamlet, have a large family of 7 children, 6 girls and 1 boy. The dos Santos own some land in Cova da Iria and in other nearby villages such as Our Lady of Ortiga and Fatima. Today, there are few people around who still remember Aljustrel as it was at the beginning of the 20th century. Maria dos Años, 97 years old, is the granddaughter of Antonio and Maria dos Santos.
I've always lived here, but it was very different then. There was nothing. No highways, no cars, nothing. It was just woods. There were only sheep, some donkeys.
The smallest child in this family is Lucia. She's just turned 10 in this photo. Lucia's best friends were her cousins, Francisco and Jacinta. These 3 little friends are very different. Lucia is thoughtful, strong and direct, but of a surprisingly open nature. She likes to tell stories, especially from the Bible, that she hears from her mom and parish priest during Sunday school. And she repeats these stories to her best friends and the younger children of Aljustrel.
She would tell me that when she was here, she would play with the other kids, and that lots of kids would come play with her because their fathers went to work at the wine estates in the area and would leave their kids here because there was always someone in the house of Lucia's mother who would take care of them. Lucia and her brothers, but also the neighborhood kids. So lots of children would come here because their parents went to work and would leave them here so they could be taken care of. My mother was a weaver. She weaved all the time. My grandparents too would often go to the estates. There was always someone in the house to take care of the children. My grandmother was a teacher at Sunday school, and she taught other kids.
Lucia's best friends and cousins, Jacinta and Francisco, live nearby in this stone house. They're the youngest children of Manuel and Olimpia Marto. Jacinta is a lively, cheerful girl who loves singing and dancing. Francisco is a silent boy. Their parents raised them, teaching them how to love God and venerate the Blessed Virgin and the saints.
Eu sou uma sobrinha de Jacinta e Francisco.
I am the niece of Jacinta and Francisco. My father was Joao, the brother of Jacinta and Francisco. I enjoyed the happiness of being born in the same house in which Jacinta and Francisco were born. I lived with my grandparents because when my grandmother died, I was already 13. They both stressed the importance of loving God, the Virgin, and of a simple religious life.
Life in Aljustrel is not easy. The children have to help out the family from their early years. Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta put out the sheep to graze and, like other kids in these places, can't go to school. But they're not ignorant. For instance, Lucia receives Holy Communion at the age of 7, when 10 is the usual minimum age required. The parish priest makes an exception after testing Lucia's knowledge of the catechism. These 3 shepherd children have a big devotion to God and are normal children for their age and time. Here in Aljustrel, the path to sanctity of these 3 little shepherds of Fatima started. In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano. More on Vaticano begins now. On May the 13th, 1917, in Cova de Iria, 3 children were tending their flock of sheep when they witnessed the supernatural apparition of a beautiful young lady. Almost 8 months had passed since the apparition of the angel. The children described the young lady as brighter than the sun, dressed in a white mantle edged with gold and holding a rosary in her hand. She asked the children to devote themselves to the Holy Trinity and to pray the rosary every day in order to bring peace to the world. The little shepherds understood that this woman was the Virgin Mary. She asked them to come to the same place on every 13th day of each month, which they did, thus totaling the number of apparitions to 6 between the months of May and October of the year 1917. The Virgin Mary also entrusted 3 secrets to the children. The first secret was a vision of hell and the suffering of sinners. The second secret was a prediction of the end of the Great War and the beginning of another unless people converted and repented. The Virgin Mary requested the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart. This secret was interpreted as a warning of the spreading of atheistic regimes, and indeed the communist revolution struck Russia on the same year as the apparitions. The third secret was a vision of the death of the Pope and of other religious figures. This latter secret was not disclosed to the public until the year 2000. It refers to the attempted murder of St. John Paul II. Later on, the Pope himself thanked Mary of Fatima for saving his life. The assassination attempt happened in Rome on May the 13th, 1981. Jacinta Pereiro Marto from Aljustrel, niece of Francisco and Jacinta, says that her father, Joao, was several times with his little siblings and cousin Lucia during the Marian apparitions.
O meu pai tinha 2 anos mais que Francisco.
My father was 2 years older than Francisco. My father had the honor of being there when the lady appeared at Valinhos. This happened in August. After that, they had all been at the apparition in Villanova de Oren. My father was there but didn't see anything. There were only Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia. and my father, but he said that, however much he opened his eyes, he couldn't see anything.
Lucia had a special role during the apparitions, as the Virgin spoke only to her.
He would say that he too wanted to see the Virgin, because when this apparition occurred, Jacinta wasn't there, but he was. And Lucia asked him to go get his sister, and he didn't want to, because he wanted to witness the apparition. But in the end, he did go look for Jacinta, and only when Jacinta arrived, then the lady appeared. But João didn't see anything, and they would ask him, "Why didn't you see anything?" And he'd say, "Well, how come Lucia saw, heard, and spoke? And Jacinta saw and heard, but Francisco saw but didn't either hear or speak. Well, I didn't see, didn't hear, and didn't speak either." He was always moved when he'd say this, because he had seen nothing.
Although they were accompanied by friends or siblings, only these 3 children saw the Virgin Mary during the apparitions. And during the last of them, the 3 little shepherds were surrounded by a crowd of 70,000 people who all saw the miracle of the sun.
No, my father, 11 years old at the time, would say, "I didn't go because everybody was saying that if the miracle did not happen, the whole family would die. And so he stayed home, he was afraid. And because he was afraid to die, he wasn't there when the miracle of the sun occurred. Just like he was at the apparition at Valinos, but nothing happened, he wasn't at the miracle of the sun. He was afraid he would die."
Soon after the apparitions, the Virgin Mary took to heaven her 2 smaller shepherds, just as she had promised them. Francisco Marto died at the age of 10 on April the 4th, 1919, and Jacinta died at the age of 9 in February of 1920. Lucia offered her life to the service of God and chose the consecrated life. She continued to report private visions throughout her life. Thanks for watching. Stick around for more on Vaticano. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano. Saturday, May the 13th, marked the 2nd day of the Pope's pilgrimage to Fatima. Unforgettable hours would unfold. Exactly 100 years since the first apparition of Our Lady to the 3 little shepherds, the Pope declared the youngest 2, Francisco and Jacinta, saints, thus becoming the first non-martyred children ever to be canonized in the Catholic Church. From the early morning hours, faithful and pilgrims started pouring into the shrine square to be present at this great celebration of the Universal Church. Before starting the Holy Mass, with 500,000 people who were eagerly expecting him, the Pope prayed for a while before the graves of the 2 saints. Beatified in the year 2000 by Pope St. John Paul II, right here in Fatima. The then prefect of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, Cardinal Saraiva Martins, explains why the beatification took place in the Portuguese city.
Why beatified in Fatima? Up until that time, in fact, all beatifications had taken place in Rome, and canonizations too, all presided over by the pontiff himself. This is the general rule of the Roman Curia. 1 year before the beatification, Lucia told me, "You will now go back to Rome. Tell the Pope that he must come to Fatima to beatify Jacinta and Francisco. He mustn't do it in Rome. Tell the Pope that if he doesn't beatify them here in Fatima, but in Rome, I, Lucia, will not send him rosaries any more." Before the beatification mass started, I went to the sacristy and Sister Lucia was there too. I told her, "Sister Lucia, you must be very happy, because 1 year ago you told me that the Pope should come here to Fatima to beatify Jacinta and Francisco. And see, the beatification mass will start here in half an hour." To which she replied very wisely, "No, Eminence, I don't have to thank the Pope. I must thank God who inspired the Pope to come here and do the beatification here."
After a short presentation of the two little shepherds' biographies, and only after reciting the Litany of Saints, the pontiff pronounced the official formula of canonization. Then, before a visibly moved square, the relics of Saints Francisco and Jacinta were carried in procession to the little square in front of the shrine, where they were placed at the foot of the statue of Our Lady. During his homily, the Pope recalled some relevant passages from the brief but intense lives of the new saints.
We have a mother, so beautiful a lady, as the seers of Fatima said to one another as they returned home on that blessed day of the 13th of May, 100 years ago. That evening, Jacinta could not restrain herself and told the secret to her mother. "Today I saw Our Lady." They had seen the Mother of Heaven. In Lucia's account, the three chosen children found themselves surrounded by God's light as it radiated from Our Lady. She enveloped them in the mantle of light that God had given her. According to the belief and experience of many pilgrims, if not of all, Fatima is more than anything this mantle of light that protects us, here as in almost no other place on earth. We need but take refuge under the protection of the Virgin Mary and to ask her, as the Salve Regina teaches, "Show unto us Jesus." We can take as our examples St. Francisco and St. Jacinta, whom the Virgin Mary introduced into the immense ocean of God's light and taught to adore Him. That was the source of their strength in overcoming opposition and suffering. God's presence became constant in their lives, as is evident from their insistent prayers for sinners and their desire to remain ever near the hidden Jesus in the tabernacle.
At the end of his homily, the Pope thanked those present for accompanying him during this pilgrimage.
Non podia deixar de vir aqui venerar a Virgem Mãe.
I could not fail to come here to venerate the Virgin Mary and to entrust to her all her sons and daughters. Under her mantle they are not lost. From her embrace will come the hope and the peace that they require, and that I implore for all my brothers and sisters in baptism and in our human family, especially the sick and the disabled, prisoners and the unemployed, the poor and the abandoned. Dear brothers and sisters, let us pray to God with the hope that others will hear us, and let us speak to others with the certainty that God will help us.
One of the most emotional moments of the day was the touching embrace shared by the Pope and little Lucas, whose miraculous healing happened through the intercession of then Blessed Francisco and Jacinta Marto. 2 days before the canonization, his parents told journalists in Fatima about this miracle, which proved to be the decisive step needed for the two blesseds to be declared saints.
On March the 3rd, 2013, at 8 p.m., our son Lucas, who was playing with his little sister Eduarda, fell from a window 6.5 meters high. He was 5 years old. He was in a very serious coma. He had 2 cardiac arrests and was operated on urgently. Doctors said he had little chance of surviving. We begin to pray to Jesus and Our Lady of Fatima, to whom we have great devotion. The next day we called the Carmel of Campo Marau, asking the sisters to pray for the boy. On that day, the sister conveyed the message to the community. A sister ran to the relics of Blessed Francis and Jacinta, who were next to the tabernacle, and felt this impulse of prayer. Little shepherds, save this boy, who is a child like you. He managed to convince the whole community to pray only with the intercession of the little shepherds. They did, in the same way all of us in the family began to pray to the little shepherd. And 2 days later, on March the 9th, Luke woke up well and began to speak, asked by his little sister. It's completely fine with no symptoms or sequels. What Lucas was before the accident, he is now. His intelligence, his character, everything is the same.
Among the many faithful in the square was also Cardinal Sean Patrick O'Malley. He shared with us his own personal reflection on the two saints.
In such a short life, they achieved great sanctity and holiness, and the fact that the Blessed Mother chose them is very significant. So I think there's a great lesson in this, and all the saints' lives are sermons for us, but in these children it's a reminder that how precious children are and that they too are called to sanctity.
The Mass over, the Pope said goodbye at the house of Our Lady of Carmel in Fatima, where he had spent the night, and from there he was taken to the Air Force Base in Monte Real. At 3:50 p.m. local time, the plane with the Pope on board took off from Portugal, headed for Rome. Join us next week on Vaticano and discover the life of the patroness of migrants, Saint Frances Cabrini. Thanks for watching.